This is a podcast by the Straits Times.
Hi, you're listening to The Hard Tackle and I'm ST sports reporter Deepanraj Ganesan. The Tsutomu Ogura era is underway as the Lions put on a brave front in their two matches against China in the past week. First, they battled back to overcome a 2-0 halftime deficit to draw 2-2 against China, but 5 days later in Tianjin, the Lions were undone 4-1 by the same opponents. So what did we learn from these matches and what is the way forward? To discuss that with me today, we have a former Lion and current Geylang International head coach, Noor Ali, and Singapore Premier League commentator and a diehard Lions fan in Zia-ul Raushan. Coach Raushan, thank you so much for coming in. I'll start with Coach Noor. You've probably had the chance to meet Coach Ogura already. What were your first impressions?
He came to OTH to meet me personally, basically to know a bit more the national players in the club. I think he's a very confident guy. I think he has been coaching at a very high level and very confident in terms of the way he talks to me, and how he presents himself and the football that he wants to play. Very calm guy, and I say something that he's quite open-minded when you talk to him on certain things about Singapore football. And you can see a lot of positive coming out in the last two games.
Okay. Raushan, I'll start with you in terms of analysing what has happened in the last two matches. Ultimately, no wins from these two matches, but I seem to sense a positivity amongst the fans. Where do you think this comes from?
I think it comes from the fact that the performance was right. We've long as fans asked for performance over points. I think we were quite realistic with what we expected when Ogura came along. As Coach alluded to, he's been very charming, not just to coaches, but to the press, to the fans as well. And I think that's been important. And that's translated on the pitch as well, right? We were together at the National Stadium in that 2-2 draw. At halftime, Deepan, you and I thought it's down and out. But he made bold substitutions, which we haven't seen, and that transpired into a bold performance by the boys to get that 2-2 draw. Even with regards to the 4-1 defeat, I know a lot of people look at the result and say, another heavy defeat to China, who are perennial powerhouses, I guess. But until we conceded that penalty or not is for debate, but until we conceded that penalty, there was adventure, there was spirit, there was hunger. And I just want to highlight the fact that we conceded the first goal in the 21st minute. But within a blink of an eye, we tried to get the equalizer. That's something I haven't seen from a Singapore team in so long. Usually after conceding, it's about damage limitation or it's about being a bit gabra after that. So I think that hunger and that spirit is what's been missing. And I know it's only been in glimpses, but Ogura has had such a short time to work with the boys and already we are seeing an impact. I think that's why the fans are excited, because they feel if after such a short space of time, Ogura can have this impact, what else can he do in the long run?
Yeah, so you talked about impact and you talked about the signs. I think we will come to that a bit later on. Coach, we go back to that first match at the National Stadium. Why was that comeback possible? What did we do right in the second half that you don't think we did in the first?
I think it's of course the two subs was key. I think something that not only the first leg, I think the second leg also, I think you can see that Ogura goes into a game to win. Not to get a point.
Sorry, how do you see that he's going
because
into a game
as
to win?
a coach, you are 1-1, and you bring in like players like Faris Ramli, Shawal Anwar, and then the last game he brought in Song and Iksan. He wants to win. He don't bring defenders in. He has a plan, and he has planned well in the last two games for him to get results. And I think the most important thing in the first leg when we play China in the National Stadium, I think is halftime talk. I think the thing that he has changed. I spoke to him when we were at Jalan Besar Stadium. I was in one of our training sessions. So he spoke to me and asked me something like, what I think that, the first thing that can be done down here. I say the problem is we have to change the mindset of the players, because I told him mental wise, we are quite weak. When we play teams like Thailand, China, we tend to half the battle is lost, And I think his halftime talk would have been going out there, knowing that something that the game is not over. We still have a chance if we get one goal back. Although we scored in moments of the game, but I think it was well taken goal by Faris and Jacob Muller. And the sub that he makes, especially for me, is Jacob. Because that guy really, really adds a lot of energy on the pitch, and when Jacob was on the pitch, he was winning all the second ball, was pick up second ball. We were closer to the goal when we pressed China instead of just, staying at the low block and we're waiting, and we were not afraid even we were 2-0 down. So that was a positive side. I think it's the halftime talk and the substitution was perfect. Yeah.
Above and beyond the halftime talk, which I completely agree with Coach Noor Ali, I think what he said at full time was also so important to almost galvanize and raise the spirit. Honestly, we were in the post-match press conference and I was buzzing. I felt like we came back from 2-0 down to get a 2-all draw. But he came in straight away and said, very measured, he said, I don't accept congratulations. If we won, I would accept it. And I think that sets the tone that, yes, positives, but we can do better. And I think that's important to get the boys on side and to get the fans on side.
Coach, you talked about something quite important there, and it's the mentality amongst players. And I've heard this before from other coaches where half the battle is lost even before the game because we go into matches saying, it's Thailand, it's China, what are we going to do? Do you think that's a big problem, and how do you rectify this? Because I think for other sports in Singapore, we have like psychologists who work with the team. I'm not so sure, but I've not seen a sports psychologist amongst this Lions team. Maybe it's something that happens behind the scenes. I wouldn't know because I have not seen it. Do you think that's something important for our players?
Oh, definitely. It's important for the modern football nowadays, because but we don't have someone who really does that. So everything lies on the head coach and even the coaching staff, So I think the basic stuff that we do always, and I think something that I see Ogura has done is that the communication, the 1v1 communication with the players, If you set certain rules and standards with these players and what you need from them, especially from the young ones and the senior ones, you have two different kind of objective with these two group of players, Sometimes it's just motivate these players to do well, and even you have good moments. If you look at one very good example, I think I would say is Faris Ramli. I think he was very, I would say, disappointed he was not being called up in the last few national games, but he has proven that he's a quality goal scorer and he wants to win, and he has scored 2 goals in the last 2 games, So I think that is something that's the Ogura effect, because you have a guy who's very experienced and scored the equalizer for the 1 goal for Singapore, and he could have put Faris on the bench in the second leg, but no, you see, that's the mental part where you give him more motivation to go out there and prove himself. And the other few players like Harish, Jacob, who didn't started the game and they have done well in the last 2 matches, And I'm very impressed with this group of young players who I would say at this point of time is playing to the way Ogura wants to play. And I think the main thing is this: they have the legs, they have the energy, and they can run the whole game. I think that is what is needed at this point of time, and we have that a lot.
Okay, just to step back a little and look at it in terms of a tactical point of view before we go on to the second match is, what are the differences you've noticed from this particular Lions team tactically compared to the ones before, whether it was under Nishigaya or Tatsuma? I'll start first. So one thing that to me was, maybe for lack of better word, alarming was how high the defense line was. I've not seen a Singapore backline that was closer to the halfway line than it was to the own box. To me, it's a bit unsettling. Maybe I'm not used to it yet. But for you, what are some of the differences you've seen?
Look, I'm no coach, so I'll allow coach to give you the proper tactical analysis. But from a layman's term, I feel going to the back four is already quite different. And you and I both agree that doesn't necessarily mean a back 5 means defensive. But on the back 4, you can see we are trying to play at least. And I feel like we are going down the middle a lot more than just parking it to the wings and then putting a inshallah ball into the box, right? There is some form of trying to break through the middle, and I think that's important, and that's just to my layman eyes. And as coach has already alluded to, I feel he's making impact substitutions based on what the game needs rather than just very expected or predictable substitutions. I think he reads the game well, so I feel those are some tactical things that have caught my eye.
All right, like you said, we have to ask the coach the tactical insight. So coach, from these 2 matches, what are some things that you notice are very different from the Singapore teams of the past?
Okay, I think definitely the energy was very good. But I think his organization in terms of defensively, where he wants to press China, and he making use of the 3 midfielders in the center of the midfield to press them out. Because it's very hard for players like Harish and even Huzisha Shairan to come out from the area to start pressing players, But I think that's the tactical part of the game. And you can see that, he studies China's and he know where he wants to press China, So very positive in terms of that, because I will not go into, I think it's too early to even talk about the football part at this point of time, because you see moments of the games, especially attackingly, and we see some very good passing football at times, but it's not consistent yet. I think he will take time in terms of that. But again, we all talk about building up possession-based football. You don't see much in the Singapore team, but I think you can see a very high pressing team, which they put opponents difficult to play out, especially when you have players like Jacob, Haris and Shashaidan in the middle. These three boys actually really makes these two games a lot of difference, because they really have the good energy down there. And then you have Ryan Stewart, who has no lungs, going up down the flanks. I think you got to give credit to the boy. I think if you look at these overseas boys that have been playing, if you look at them, look at the physical aspect of them. They look fantastic. They look at the national level where they are stronger, fitter. They can really compete with the China players. So I think these are aspects that actually has improved the national team at this point of time. And to be honest, the hardest part for Ogura is now moving forward, and he has to make certain harsh decision, because I think some of the players in the national team should call it a day.
Yeah. I will definitely go into that a bit later on, because I think that's
is coming up.
Yeah, the hard tackle is definitely coming up. Because it seems with the overwhelming reaction after the 4-1 defeat. But just staying on about the coaching insights, when you go from a back 5 or back 3 to a back 4, is it as easy as just making a switch? I mean, in FM is quite easy to do it. But in terms of if you are a player, if you are a defender in the team, what's it like to go from a back 3, back 5 to a back 4? Is that something that you think makes it harder for Ogura?
I mean, it's not. I don't think the formation plays a very important part, because if you look at the way Ogura press, at times Nazrul or Ryan still have to push up higher, and you still have three at the back. So it's not about the system; it's about how he wants to press China. So that was the most important thing. He wants to be compact in the middle. That's why he plays with a 4-3-3 formation. He adds a bit more speed with Ryan Stewart on the right side, and then he has the experience of in the first game of who's this Safwan, in the second game with Haris controlling at the back, and of course you can't take the credit away from Hassan. Look at how he was so composed throughout the whole game with his experience controlling the defense line. He knows when to go for the quick counter attack. He knows how to slow down the game. He knows when to build up. He knows when to play the. I mean, these are experienced players that helps the team. So I don't think the formations of 5 or 4 really was a big difficult change for Ogura. I think the key to this is how actually you want to make use of these players that we have at this point of time, and how do we want to go out and organize to play against China. I think that's more important.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think yesterday we saw once Singapore went down to 10 men, that pressing was gone already, because Ogura had drilled the 11 players on the pitch to perfection to go out and carry out their job. But once one man was missing from that jigsaw, you could see it almost fall wayside, right? And also we were chasing the game, therefore there were gaps at the back. But to coach's point, I feel over 2 weeks already he has implemented this style of pressing that's so important, that's going to take up energy, and therefore the legs are going to be so important. Coach name-check a lot of people. One person I like to name-check is Glenn Quay. I thought he gave a great account of himself in the first game. Yesterday when he came on as well, another great performance. So I think, to coach's point and what we'll touch on later, the young boys are giving the older guard a run for their money, and that can only spell good news.
A disclaimer at this point. I saw a lot of reactions on social media were talking about how Singapore should have made their one-man advantage count. So for those who perhaps were not following the game too closely,
included,
and the commentator who perhaps might have misled people, when China received the red card for that challenge on Joel Chu, it also meant that Singapore were also down to 10 men, because they had used 5 substitutions by that point, and Joel couldn't continue. At this point also, best wishes to Joel in his recovery. Looked like a nasty challenge. I think he posted a scan on Instagram and it didn't look good as well. So best wishes to him. But yes, it wasn't really a 11 against 10 match, and we had to play 10 against 10. And to your point, I think there were a lot of spaces that opened up. Raushan, ultimately a defeat in the second game. We will talk about the negatives a bit later on, because I'm someone who loves to focus on the negatives. But what do you think was the main positive thing to come up from the second match, you thought? Because yes, I think it's easy to say that a 4-1 defeat, and it's a big scoreline. But why still the positivity?
I think the scoreline ultimately flatters China. They needed that result. With the quotes that were coming out after the 2-all draw, you could see the pressure was ramped up on this China team, captain making a U-turn and stuff like that. The pressure was on them, and yesterday in front of a sold-out home crowd, they needed to deliver the result. Yes, the 4-1 scoreline looks like they got the job done very, very well. But if you actually watch the game, I feel Singapore were in it until the 2 late goals were conceded. Poor goals to concede, yes, but ultimately Singapore gave themselves a fighting chance. And I feel like the ultimate positivity that's coming from this is the Lions never let their heads drop. Even when they were 1-0 down or 2-1 down, they always tried to
you
get
say
an
they didn't
equalizer.
let their heads drop, but I would say that when the penalty was considered, I felt like some of the energy dipped. I felt that the mentality reverted back to the old habits. Did you see that, or you think that's just me?
Then my argument to that would be Ogura tried to address that mentality or that head dropping by making a bold substitution by bringing someone like Joel Chew on because he wanted a carrier in the middle of the park to try and bring the ball forward for him. So perhaps he noticed what you noticed as well and he felt the game needed a change. Unfortunately, luck would have it. It didn't work out that way. But ultimately, I feel, look, in years gone by when the Singapore team play or travel, they come back with their heads down. Right now, the Singapore camp seems to be a place that everybody wants to be, fans and players included. Coach brought up the Faris Ramli example, right? So-called put aside from the team under the previous regime. He's come in and he scored 2 goals. I feel there'll be players who've been there or thereabouts in the national team looking at it now before the SPL season starts thinking, if I play well, this coach is going to give me a chance. And I feel Faris Ramli is an example of what you can do if you play well. And I think Ogura deserves credit for that.
Coach, do you think that this, because you talked about it earlier, this mentality thing, did you see signs during the game where these 2 matches where that is changing? And also, to my point that I just raised with Raushan, when we considered the penalty, you could see the players were frustrated,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't be? I was
Yeah.
watching from the office and I was frustrated. But did you see that it almost distracted from what they were meant to do? Or do you feel that's just normal?
No, okay. So I was watching the game, so I think it's a bit soft on the penalty. I think that's take a bit of toll on the players, because if it was a clear penalty, then I think you have nothing to say, But I think it's a bit soft. And after putting so much of hard work and then that kind of penalty is be given, then, and when I was watching the game, I was telling myself, okay, this is a challenge at this point in time because you have no Ogura, you need senior players to step up.
Oh, because Ogura cannot go and make a team.
You
talk
can't
now.
do
Yeah.
anything. You can. You need senior players to step up because heads will go down. Because after putting so much of hard work and then you just went down to 1. So at this point of time, I think the senior players was key because they need to lift up the team and they need to be there. And so of course you see in the first 5-10 minutes after the 2-1, we were a bit. I would not say we put heads down, but I think we were too eager to go out to get the equalizer and we opened up too much at that point of time, And I would have done the same thing, maybe what Ogura have done, because a draw would not mean anything. Maybe you will definitely want a point or 3 points back. So you lose 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, you still finish bottom of the table, So I think the mindset of going out trying to win is still there, even we were 2-1 down. So like I say, you see how his press conference when he was doing the post-match press conference, then he was saying that, he's not happy with the 2-2 draw. So you can see that he's not going to go out there and lose 2-1, He still wants to go out there and try to get a point, a 3 point, So on that aspect, I think something that the players have to think, not the coaches. The coaches can't do much on the field. You cannot be shouting and nobody can hear you, So I think the senior players are key at that point of time. So that is the important point for me. Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to some perhaps negatives from these 2 games, at least in my opinion. Before we go on to talk about the individual players, in terms of this new system, I think we saw some flaws here and there and perhaps players not being used to it. For example, I think a lot of times Ule, the Chinese striker, was able to go through the middle quite easily. He scored 1 goal, could have got another in a very similar situation. Why do you think that happens, Coach? Is it because we are now pushing higher up, so there is going to be these balls they go through the middle, especially because the midfielders are also pressing higher? Why does this happen?
Yeah, so that's the right point. So we are pressing higher up, and then we got to push our defense higher up, and especially when you have the ball, you tends to be imbalanced, because if the team doesn't move together and doesn't have that proper, they don't move synchronized together, and then you will leave that kind of gap like how they get away in the first goal. I think that was a quick counter attack. I'm not impressed with China, but I think but they had a very good player in the captain, so that is something that we have to look at lah. Because the minute we lose that possession, we did well actually at times in terms of the counter pressing, and you can see players double team, and trying to win the ball even in the center of the park. But the minute that moments happen, that becomes a problem. Even I think the third goal, so it suddenly create a 1v1 situation out there, and then but it's a well taken goal lah. It was very hard to save that goal, but that's the situation is gonna be. So something that we're gonna look at the defense line, because something that you're gonna look is that you need speed if you're gonna play at a very high line. You need someone not only experienced, you need someone fast, because you're gonna put the game against China. You start pressing them higher up, and then you will leave that kind of spaces behind. And but I think in National Stadium, Hassan did very well, because a few times the ball went behind the defense line and he was there to sweep the ball. So, but you can't do that all the time. So something that we got to look at lah.
Any other things that you both noticed that are things that we've got to improve on tactically?
For me, the striker position is still a problem. I know the nation holds its hopes on Iksan, but since his injury, he himself has admitted he's not the same player anymore. And I felt like over the two games, yes, as a striker in this system, you tend to be isolated. But even yesterday when he was 2-1, Iksan had that header that I feel, rewind 18 months, Iksan would have buried it. So I don't know if it's a case of match fitness, not being at the peak of his powers, or it's just this is the new Iksan we have to deal with the injury. And I think that's a problem, because while we talk about the high pressing and trying to play on the front foot, chances have to be taken when they are made, because as Singapore, we are not going to be creating so many chances. You need to be more clinical, and that for me is a problem almost, as well as the pace at the back that coach touched on, right? I'm looking at the list in my mind of the centre-backs that we have. No one screams pace to me, and I feel like that's going to be a problem. The third issue I feel is, while this midfield is all about high pressing, we lack that ball carrier. That player, yes, you have for the lack of better word, you have your runners to go and get the ball back, but you don't have anyone to bring the ball forward to stitch it from midfield to attack. That's where perhaps we will touch on naturalization and the likes of Kyoga possibly filling that role later on, but I feel that's the issue.
Okay. Coach, in terms of tactics, anything else that you felt was very noticeable, that perhaps something that Ogura still needs to work on, or any other things that you think came up?
For me, I think I just want to look at how he approached the next two games, because does he go on to play the same game? Or I think that the South Korea game, I think we know how hard it's going to be. It's not going to be easy. But Thailand is going to be a good test for us, because then we can see where our level is. By June, we know 3 months down the road, we should know how our national team has already shaped up. So it's very interesting. I want to see whether he keeps to certain coaches has their own philosophy and they stick to the way they want to play. Certain coaches are very tactical in terms of every game they approach, and I think that is something that at the national setup where we are currently, I think we have to be a bit more tactician in terms of that, because I don't think just a philosophy of football we want to play at this point in time is going to be easy with the current players we have. But something positive, I would say that it's good to see that everybody is running hard.
Yeah. If I may play devil's advocate, high press, counter press, high line, is this really the kind of football Singapore can play in the long run? Do we have the players? Do you think it's something that our players' fitness can match? Or am I just being, like we started the show talking about it, right? Like the mentality, even before we go out, we're already facing a losing battle. Like, look at me. Even before Ogura has tried to put this system in play, I'm playing devil's advocate and saying, can we really play that kind of football? What do you both think?
I mean, definitely. I mean, we are. You look at the players like Thailand, Vietnam. we are as good as them.
Mm.
We are as good as them. But the thing is, like I say, we go back to the mental aspect again. Our players are currently going over to the ASEAN countries like Indonesia and Thailand, to play. And the Vietnam and Thailand players are going to Japan and Korea to play. But saying that, I can see in the last game that there is already a lot of improvements in the individual, because it's important to get this individual at a certain level. Then you can have this kind of team to compete, So a lot of our local players currently playing the SPL, they have to step up. To be able for us to sustain this, is not about that 11 or that 10 players. It's about that 20 players, 25 players. Even Ogura can say, I'm gonna do high pressing. Again, I would say the minute you took out Haris and you put Zulfami into the picture, I mean, he's a very good player, experience, he has a very good left leg. But that intensity is going to be different, because Zulfami is a ball player. When you want a ball, you want a ball carrier, you want someone creative, you also want someone to win ball. That's a modern number 6, which currently we don't have. I mean, like how Roshan was saying earlier on, So it's possible for us to do this. I think it's already a step forward, and the boys already have shown that they can do it in the last 2 games. The interesting part is, for me, is that we can see a defensive organization here where we want to high press, open and everything. The interesting part is now is the how we're gonna set up ourselves attackingly, because we have a good striker in Iksan, we have a good striker in Ilhan. These 2 guys are superb in the air. It's a good hold up play. We have good wingers, in Shawal, in Faris, and then we have very good midfielders right now. So do we have overlapping fullbacks at this point of time, or fullbacks that can go higher up the pitch? I think Glenn can do that. Nazrul can do that, So how he wants to set up in terms of his attacking options, it is very interesting to see right now, because that is something that we have not seen much in terms of the attacking power we have in China game, So we scored through moments. So that's something that we want to look at.
And from a fan perspective, the short answer to that is definitely can. Because I feel, like Coach touched on, in such a short space of time, the boys are already showing the willingness to press. And as we already mentioned, the SPL is in its off-season. We relied heavily on the foreign-based boys. Even of the foreign-based boys, only Raihan, to me, caught the eye completely because he was at peak fitness, right? So I feel going forward, because Ogura is involved in the Young Lions as well, I feel he can nitpick the boys to play that certain way, and across by June, when the next fixtures happen, they will be better equipped physically, fitness-wise, to try and deal with that sort of football that he wants. And I think in the under-21 team as well, currently, they are the fullbacks that you speak of, the likes of Noor Ali playing for the Young Lions now. Maybe he will be developed as the long-term successor in terms of overlapping fullbacks.
Maybe in the Noor household, he can work on one of these overlapping fullbacks a bit more closely to prepare him for the national team. In terms of moving forward now, what does Ogura need to do to build on this? Of course, he's picked a team based on more or less the interim preseason, maybe past matches, hasn't really seen players up close in terms of a competitive setting. He will get to do that as the season starts. But what does he need to focus on? What does he need to build on from here?
I think he needs to look beyond the headlines, look beyond the positive headlines at least, which I'm sure he will, judging by the person that he's held himself to be. I think it's time in these 2 weeks with the boys, he would have addressed what the issues that need to be addressed. And I think that's what he'll be focusing on before the season starts with the preseason tournament, as well as when the season starts. I think he will then try and fix that identity of play. I think this coaching team that he's put together as well had their first experience together, so that brains trust will come together and address what they want to achieve. Once they have that formulated plan based on these 2 weeks, he goes out and scouts players who will fit that system, and hopefully before the 2 games in June, he can have a taster in terms of getting the team together and trying to see if they fit the mold. And I think that's important.
Coach, for you, what does Ogura now need to do to ensure that he kicks on from here?
I mean, just to add on to whatever he say, I think he has to make a bit of harsh decision to actually, talk to certain players, because the way that he wants to play, he roughly has an idea. And I think by the time the league starts, he will roughly have to make certain harsh decision to start dropping certain players and call the young bloods to come in and start proving themselves. I think there is, like how we spoke earlier on, there's no Adam, there's Farhan, Young Lions, and there's some other players at the club level also who are good enough at a very good age to step up into the national team. So I think that's going to be the big task for him, to make the call on dropping certain players and bring in new faces, and something that he have shown and proven in the last 2 games, that these boys are good enough to compete at this point in time.
So what you're saying is that he has already an idea of how he wants to play. He must call up players who fit this philosophy. If you don't fit, you shouldn't be part of the national team. At least under
I won't say you won't be part of the national team. You have to work if you want to be in the part of the national team, because the way that you see Ogura, it's only one word: run. You start running, you start putting more effort, you start showing that high intensity. If you are able to do this, then the rest will be much more easier to work with. So I think that's something that is going to push, especially the senior players in the team, because of course it's good to have a few experienced players in the team, but again, you look at this team, they can compete 90 minutes. So you need, like how we say, if you take out Haris, you need someone who can does a Haris job. My only concern in this team is that there was so much creativity back then with people like Shadan. You have players like Zulfami who still have that creativity in the center of the pitch. But looking at this team, we don't have, actually. We don't have the creativity that you need in the center. Hard work is definitely class, but of course you need something to win games. You need match winners. And I think that's the reason why that at this point of time, I think Ogura focus on the high pressing game, because I think something that if we win the ball higher up, then we will get closer to the goal to score goals.
I can't have a show called Hard Tackle without asking the pertinent question. He touched on it earlier, Coach Raushan. You were nodding along. Who are some of these players that we've got to move on from, or you think they've got to work harder, or maybe change their style to be a part of this national team? Who are some players that you think didn't really grab their chances in these 2 games? Raushan and then Coach.
Look, if pressing and pace is the order of the day, then there are some players who certainly don't fit the bill. I felt Zulfami Arifin, for the beautiful left foot that he is probably not an Ogura type of player. Maybe he could be a squad player because of experience, but certainly does not warrant a starting 11 place. Off air, I spoke about this with the both of you as well. I feel Nazrul Nazari can compete at the ASEAN level perhaps, but is he the answer for an overlapping fullback, that full pace energy that we want to match Raihan, who plays further up the pitch? Those are 2 names that stand out for me. When I talk about Haris, all of us know he's already
Haris Harun.
Harun. We already know he's on the wrong side of 30. This is no disservice to him, but he's already focusing on career after football. So maybe it's time to use him for his experience, but not necessarily rely on him so much.
I think with a high line, he left a lot of real estate at the back.
He certainly did, and I'm glad you picked up on that challenge very, very well to include that pun in. But to your point, Haris can still offer that leadership, because ultimately he's still a coach's player and he's been the lieutenant on the pitch for many, many coaches. But I think it's important that he is also phased out. And let's be honest, we talk about Hassan Sani, Superman Hassan Sani, but he hits 40 this year. And for the longest time, he's kept that number 1 jersey, deservingly so. But what's the long-term plan here? I know Shazwan and Zafan are in the squad as well, but how long before they are blooded in just for the experience? Because you can't call it a day when Hassan decides to retire and then you throw the new keeper into the deep end. So to Coach's point, there are so many difficult conversations that need to be had, because it's not just about phasing the older players. I think they need to look at how they can still harness their experience, and it's going to be difficult.
Coach, I have to get you on this as well. You mentioned it first, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of perhaps certain players, and also who do you think needs to wake up, or who do you think needs to basically change the style a bit?
I mean, I will not mention names because I think what's important is this. I think the current players who are in the national team, I think where's the standard now. You know what is going to be expected from Ogura. So I think it's about time to step up, because if you don't step up, then you won't be in the team. So you know that you got to work harder. And for me, there is quality on the bench, actually. There was good quality on the bench when I see the squad, So it's just that there must be a reason why Ogura started the team that he has started, because some of the players on the bench would have played if he was a previous coach, So that is the difference that Ogura has made. So it's also a sign telling the players that if you want to be part of the team, you have to wake up and back up and then get fitter and stronger and faster, because like I say, he's all about run, So I think just a message to the players that there is a proper structure down here. There's a good organization down here. You want to still be part of the team for the next 5-10 years, you have to work hard. And the young ones, I think there's good opportunity for you guys to show Ogura out here that you are good enough to play for the national team. And definitely looking at the way Ogura has done things, and I think besides being, I think we know he has always been an assistant coach, but he has worked with the youth in Yokohama Marinos. So definitely he always look at the young bloods to groom. Said something interesting about him, and there is good opportunity or any chance for anybody at this point of time to be part of the national team.
So the message seems to be shape up or ship out. It seems to be the overriding message. I'm down to my last two questions now. First of all, we talked about what Ogura can do going forward. Now, what can FAS do to help Ogura going forward? So I think after the last Suzuki Cup, I think there was talk about fastening the naturalization process. We haven't seen anything come up with that. I think Kyoga has announced quite recently he's got his PR. He still needs to get his citizenship. How else can FAS help? So first of all, talk about naturalization if you want to, but what are the other areas FAS can help? I've heard talks before that, should the national team coach be allowed to train local based players once a week? Coach, you will know whether that's even possible or not. You might not want it. You have to take care of the interests of your club after all. But how can FAS now help this process?
Deepan, you asked for honest conversation. I think it's time I go through with my heart tackle at the moment. And I feel the FAS, after that Indonesia game, which we lost in the semi-final a couple of years ago, I felt the association was hung up on that for so long over a defeat that they failed to address what needed to be done. Fair enough, Yoshida left soon after, so perhaps there's that argument. But right now, I feel there's a lot of feel-good factor based on what Ogura has achieved over the past 2 games. I just fear the FAS are just going to bask in the glory of, we got this appointment right. There you go. It was a third Japanese. All of you had something to say. Look what he has done. This is not the time to do that. This is the time to go out and back the manager in every possible way, whether it's with fast-tracking naturalization, whether it's giving him purview to players. I know maybe the SPL coach here would disagree, but giving him more time with players to build a squad. I feel the FAS needs to realize that the hard work only starts now. The appointment was a difficult one. They got it right, seemingly, but the hard work doesn't stop here. I feel they need to make hay while the sun shines almost, and I hope they do that.
Coach, what about you?
I mean, as a coach, it's our responsibility as head coaches to make sure the players are fit, and it's also the club responsibility to make sure that these players are good enough or fit enough to be playing in the national team during the season, So it cannot also be part only of the national team to look at these matters, because in season is to be honest, it's very hard for us to release the players once a week also, because we are a professional setup. We don't see that happens anywhere part of the world, You take during the FIFA break, we are fine with that, there's no issue with that. So I think it's on our part as a club, as coaches, we need to monitor this group of players. And also at the end of the day, it's also important that the players must understand itself. How important is this? Because you're going to have a long season. If you're a national player, you have your international, you won't have your break. Basically, your international break is continue on with games that you're going to play. How you're going to keep yourself fit, injury free. This is something that we have to look back. And if I keep on talking about this, it will never end. Because if you look on the ground, actually, it's hard for us at club level to actually trying to maintain the best condition for the players, because you need all the facilities to do that. You cannot be going through fitness with all the public out there and trying to work out something with the boys. So that is something that we want to do on the ground, but it's not easy for us because we can only basically maintain these players on the pitch. But in terms of the strength work, instead of the fitness work or certain work that we want to do, or rehab, injury rehab, that's something that we always have to go back to FAS, and if they are national players, they have to go back there and do their treatment. So I think it takes both ways to work together to make sure that you keep these players fit, strong for the national team. I think that's very, very important. And just one thing in terms of the trying to get this player neutralized to play for Singapore and everything. We are talking about Kyoga and everything. I mean, it's a good aspect because you have a quality player here. But again, we are look at this. We don't forget that Reddy had very good 9 years when he had these neutralized players. And at the same time, we suffered the next 15 years. Because when we gave opportunity to do this group of players, we actually killed the development of Singapore football going up, because if you look at right now, we are actually progressing well with the youth structure in Singapore. There's a lot of things being done on the ground, trying to make things better with the youth boys and everything. For a short-term success, maybe yes. For a long-term success, please do not forget the youth structure, because this is something that we worry after Reddy's time, because then after that, then we start blaming our youth structure, and we have an issue with our youth structure. The problem was there was no pathway or opportunity for this group of boys. We must not forget, so we want to look at that short-term success. We must also not forget that 10 years down the road, you have your bunch of boys who play in the YOG recently, and this is your future boys, and where do they stand when you have 6-7 neutralized players in the national team, and what are the opportunities of them playing for the national team? I think this is also important to look at, because we should not just focus on the short-term success only. Yeah.
Okay. To end off, we've talked quite at length about Ogura's impact and what's the way forward. If I can allow you to do so, end off with what your message is for fellow Singaporean football fans in terms of believing in the way forward, and how hopeful you are that under Tsutomu Ogura, the Lions will be roaring again.
I'm certainly hopeful that under Ogura-san, the Lions will roar again. That's based on the two performance. But I must caveat that by saying some of what I've seen online is way overboard by the way of praise. I feel like over 180 minutes of football, we've played 100 good minutes. But some of the columns I'm seeing, some of the stuff I'm seeing on social media is way overboard based on very little. And that's, for me, feels good, because we haven't had such feel-good conversations about Singapore football in a long time. But I think we need to keep our expectations in check while we keep our ambitions high, right? I feel it's important that we continue to back the boys. As it is, after the 4-1 defeat to China, the Keyboard Warriors are out again. I think we need to look beyond the Keyboard Warriors and understand that this is a long-term project. To Coach's point, there are youths coming through. I'm not asking all fans to have the patience for the youths, which will take 10, 12 years for them to eventually play for the national team. I'm not asking for that much patience, but I think Ogura has done enough to have a bit of credit in the bank to show that given the right structure, given the right resources, he can build something. And if anything, these boys will fight for the badge again. And I think that's so important. And I hope the fans stick by it, win, lose or draw, because with pressing, with pace, with the football, Ogura insists there will be heavy defeats along the way. We can't slam the boys for heavy defeats if we want to celebrate the feel-good moments.
Coach, he's talked to the fans. Speak to the fraternity, fellow coaches, perhaps SPL chairman, FAS. What do we hope for in terms of what can they do? What can we live up to in terms of the way forward?
I mean, definitely, first thing, we need to support the national coach lah, and in every aspect, because you will not get good results all the time. You will have bad results. I think what is important is the first thing that we can say that is a change of coach. So there was a lot of motivation. Everybody wanted to prove something. That was why the two performances there. The key moving forward is actually the consistency in Ogura's behavior, because can he keep that consistency? Then you can see the progress, because at this point in time, the players believe the coaches. Okay, but the expectations are also too high at this point in time, and we are going overboard a bit in terms of talking so much about the last two results. And I'll say this again, China is not a fantastic team. The real test is Thailand. The real test is Thailand. You want to know where you stand? Thailand, because that's where you're going to compete your Suzuki Cup, and I think you look at Thailand, they've drawn Korea, and yesterday was a good game. Even I watched the game, even they lost 3-0, they actually had a few shots at goal, and at chances. If they have taken, it would be a different scoreline, So for us, let's not be complacent also. there is certain things that we want to achieve down the road. We need the support from every single one. For me, let's stay positive. There's a lot to look at this point of time with this group of young players. And I won't say we are on the right track, but at least after the first 2 games, the first thing that you have seen is we have changed the mental aspect of the players. They are willing to put the hard work in. And again, if it's going to be very consistent in terms of what we do from now on, I think we will definitely get good results.
All right, Raushan, Coach Noor, thank you so much for coming on and talking about the last 2 games and analysing the way forward. I think lots of positivity in the room, but also we are circumspect in terms of what we can expect and what we should do going forward. Here, I think we all want the Singapore national team and Singapore football to do well, so we speak in that regard. Thank you once again and hope the Lions continue to roar.
Thank you so much for having me,
Thank
Deepan.
you.